we are checking if a response is okay or not. But besides that, we could also have a technical error. In both cases, I want to throw an error, which I can then handle in the component that dispatched this action. Now, if we got a technical error, an error object will be thrown automatically. But otherwise, I want to throw one manually. So here I want to get an error or create a new error. And in this error object, I want to set the message either to response data.message, if we have such a field, or to failed to fetch as a fallback. And then I want to throw this error object. So I'm creating a new error object, and the error constructor function is built into JavaScript, and I'm throwing this here. Now, whenever an error is thrown here in this dispatched action, the component that did dispatch it, in this case coaches list, can handle it. And that's exactly what we want to do here. So here in load coaches, besides changing the isLoading status, I'll now also add a new second data property, the error data property, which initially is null, like this. And this error should be set whenever this dispatched action throws an error. Here we can use try-catch, which is built into JavaScript, to try executing this line, but then if we fail, I want to catch the error and do something in the error scenario so that the app doesn't crash, but we can define which code should execute if it fails. So what do I want to do here? I want to set this error equal to error.message, or as a fallback, in case this error object shouldn't have a message property, to something went wrong. And now we're setting this error data property, which we now can use in our template to show the user an error. And now it's up to you how you want to show such an error message to the user. I want to show the error message by opening an overlay, a modal, that shows the error to the user, and then the user has to confirm, and maybe he or she wants to try again or whatever. But at least we will show the error to the user. So let's add such a modal here. Now for this error modal, which I want to show, I prepared another component for you. It's the base dialog component, which you find attached, which you can copy into your UI folder. Now I prepared this component for you simply so that we don't waste too much time on creating yet another component that's really not doing that much. It's just a dialog, a default HTML dialog being rendered with a backdrop behind it. It's shown with a show prop that is received here, which has to be a Boolean and which is required. We use that to show both the backdrop and the dialog. And I use teleport here to teleport it to the body so that it's not rendered in the DOM hierarchy where we use this component, but always directly in the body. Then we get a title prop and a fixed prop. Title is for the title, which is shown in the header of the dialog. The main content is dynamic. We can use a slot here. We could also use a slot to replace the header and also use a slot to replace the actions, the button we show here. But by default, I show a close button here, which triggers the try close method, just as clicking on the backdrop does. And the try close method is a method which emits the close event, but it checks if the fixed prop is set. And if it is set to true, it actually does not emit the close event. The idea is that you could use this dialog also in a non-closable way, which ensures that it can't be closed by clicking the backdrop. That could be useful if you, for example, want to show the dialog to hold a loading spinner, and it should then automatically go away, controlled from outside of this component when the loading spinner isn't needed anymore. So it's really just a flexible dialog component which shows an overlay, and we're going to use this component. For that, in main.js, we have to register it as a global component. So base dialog from components UI base dialog.view, that's the import we need. And then with that import added, we can register it as a component with the app component method here, base dialog, pointing at base dialog. And now that component is available. And I want to use it in coaches list to show an error message to the user if fetching data failed. For that here, we can simply add base dialog in the template of this component. Again, it will not be rendered in that position of the DOM hierarchy. Instead, it will always be teleported to the body because of the teleport inside of base dialog. But I want to use it in this coaches list component because here I want to show the error message. So in a paragraph, which we pass between the base dialog tags to use the default slot in there, which is this slot in this content section here, this slot receives this paragraph. And here in this paragraph, I want to output error because the error data property in coaches list is null initially, but is actually set to an error message if we do have an error. And now I of course only want to show the dialog if we do have an error, so we can bind the show prop of base dialog to not error. That might look strange, but this ensures that if error is truthy, it's converted into a real boolean. If I would pass in just error, I would pass in a string as a value for show, but show wants a boolean. If I add one exclamation mark, I pass the opposite, and I don't want the opposite. So two exclamation marks convert a string, a truthy value, into a real true boolean. That's why I'm using that here. So here we pass in true if we have an error and false if we don't have one, and internally the show prop is then used to show or hide the dialog and the backdrop. We can also pass in a title and set this to an error occurred. And with that, we should show this dialog whenever we have an error. So if I reload, since fetching always fails, we now see this error dialog. Now it would be great if we could close it, and the base dialog does emit the close event whenever we click on the backdrop or the close button. And therefore, back in coaches list, we can listen to the close event here, and then, for example, execute a handle error method, which we have yet to add. So handle error should be added here, maybe after loading the coaches. And in here, I simply want to set error back to null. And once it is null, it's a falsy value, and therefore show will receive false as a value, and therefore it will not be shown anymore. So with that, if we reload, you see this is the error, but if I click the backdrop, for example, then we close it. Or if I click close. Now at the moment, we always get this error because this is a forced error. After all, I manipulated the URL here in the coaches actions. This needs the n at the end. So we'll bring this back, but now we can see that error handling also works here. Now we could also bring a loading spinner and error handling to the coach registration if we want to, but I will not do it here. But you can absolutely do this and think of ways of adding it there as well. That would be a nice practice. But another practice, which I also wanna implement here, or which I wanna do here in the next lectures, is bringing that loading spinner and the error handling to requests. When we fetch requests here, I want to fetch them from the backend. We're not doing this yet. And I also want to store requests on the backend. I want to store requests on Firebase. As always in this entire module, try this on your own. In the next lecture, we'll start implementing this together.